They had seen this before. But tonight was different. Daniel didn't react the way Ethan seemed to expect. There was no anger, no raised voice, just a slow breath, measured and controlled. Naomi's hand lightly touched his arm, not to stop him, but to remind him to stay calm. "Could you please check again?" Daniel asked, his voice steady. "The reservation should be under Carter. 7:30. Ethan let out a quiet sigh, the kind meant to show annoyance. He tapped the screen once, twice, barely even looking. "Nothing here," he said flatly. "Like I told you, we're fully booked." Naomi glanced around the dining room. Several tables sat empty, candles still unlit, menus neatly folded. A couple in designer coats walked past them and were immediately greeted with smiles. "That table has been empty all evening," Naomi said gently. "We don't mind waiting." Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice as if offering advice. "This place attracts a certain clientele," he said. "I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment." The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. Not surprise, but disappointment. It wasn't the refusal that hurt. It was the assumption behind it, the quiet judgment, the decision made in seconds, without facts, without respect. A few nearby diners shifted uncomfortably. One woman frowned. A man looked away, suddenly very interested in his phone. No one said anything. Naomi straightened her shoulders. "We came here for dinner," she said calmly. "Nothing more." Ethan shrugged. "And I'm telling you, we're not able to accommodate you." Silence followed. Daniel nodded slowly, as if accepting the answer. "All right," he said. "Thank you for your time." Naomi gave a small, polite smile. Together, they turned and walked toward the exit. Ethan exhaled, relieved, already reaching for the next reservation slip. But halfway to the door, Naomi stopped. She turned back. Not angry, not emotional, but composed. "One last thing," she said. Ethan looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Yes." Daniel stepped forward and placed his hand calmly on the host stand. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he removed 2 leather-bound identification cases and set them down gently. The gold lettering caught the light. City Health Department. Senior Inspectors. Ethan blinked. Daniel opened the badge slowly, deliberately, letting the moment breathe. "My wife and I are conducting unannounced evaluations across the city," he said. "We prefer to experience restaurants exactly as regular guests do." Naomi met Ethan's eyes. "Tonight gave us a very clear picture." The color drained from Ethan's face. I didn't know," he stammered. "If I had known who you were." Daniel raised a hand. "That's precisely the issue," he said quietly. Around them, the room had gone silent. Conversation stopped. Forks hovered midair. Every eye was watching. Naomi glanced around the dining room. "Clean kitchens matter," she said. "But so does dignity." Ethan swallowed hard. "Please," he said, forcing a nervous smile. "Let me get the manager. We can fix this." Daniel closed the badge and slipped it back into his jacket. "We'll return tomorrow morning," he said, "with our full team." Naomi nodded. "And we'll be thorough." They didn't wait for a response. They walked out into the night, the soft click of the door closing behind them, sounding louder than any argument. Inside Le Maison, the music resumed, but the mood had shifted. The laughter felt forced, the luxury suddenly fragile. And standing behind the host stand, Ethan realized something too late. The decision he had made in seconds. The glance, the assumption, the dismissal, had just set a clock in motion. What he didn't know was that the people he had just dismissed were not ordinary customers. Daniel and Naomi took only a few steps before Naomi slowed down. Not out of hesitation, but out of clarity. Moments like this didn't demand anger. They demanded truth. She turned back. "Excuse me," she said calmly. Ethan looked up again, clearly annoyed now. "Yes." Daniel stepped beside her. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "We weren't asking for special treatment," he said. "Just equal treatment." Ethan crossed his arms. "And I've already given you my answer." Naomi nodded. "Then allow us to give you ours." Daniel reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out a small leather case and placed it on the host stand. Naomi did the same. 2 badges. Official. Unmistakable. City Health Department, Senior Inspector. For a split second, Ethan didn't understand what he was seeing. Then his eyes widened. The color drained from his face. I didn't realize, he stammered. If I had known who you were. Daniel raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. That's exactly why this matters, he said quietly. Around them, the restaurant had fallen into an uneasy silence. Conversations paused. Cutlery hovered midair. A few guests leaned subtly closer, sensing something important unfolding. Naomi looked around the room, not with anger, but with careful observation. We visit restaurants without announcing ourselves, she said. It allows us to see how people are treated when no one thinks they're being watched. Ethan swallowed hard. There must be some misunderstanding, he said quickly. Please, let me get the manager. We can seat you immediately. Daniel closed the badge and slid it back into his jacket. No, he said. We've seen enough for tonight. Naomi met Ethan's eyes. We'll return tomorrow morning. With a full inspection team. Ethan's confident posture collapsed. Tomorrow, he whispered. Daniel nodded. And we won't be checking, just the dining room. They turned and walked toward the exit. No shouting. No threats. Just certainty. The door closed behind them with a soft click, but inside Le Maison, the atmosphere had changed completely. The music felt louder. The luxury suddenly fragile. The next morning, black SUVs lined the street outside the restaurant. Health inspectors entered with clipboards and gloves. Storage rooms were opened. Freezers checked. Logs reviewed. Staff questioned. What they found was alarming. Expired food hidden behind fresh labels. Improper storage temperatures. Missing sanitation records. Untrained staff handling food without protection. Violations that had been ignored for years. By the end of the day, a bright notice was posted on the glass door. Temporarily closed due to health code violations. News spread fast. Social media exploded. Former employees shared stories of mistreatment. Customers posted reviews they had stayed silent about for too long. And Ethan? He stood outside the restaurant that evening, watching inspectors seal the doors. The same place where he once stood tall, deciding who belonged and who didn't. Within 48 hours, Le Maison was officially shut down. A week later, Naomi posted a simple message online. It went viral. Respect should never depend on appearance. Power doesn't announce itself. And how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. That's who you really are. Daniel and Naomi didn't celebrate. They returned to their work, quietly protecting public health, quietly demanding fairness. And somewhere in the city, Ethan learned a lesson he would never forget. You don't know who someone is by looking at them. You don't know their authority, their influence, or their purpose. And sometimes the smallest act of arrogance is all it takes to lose everything. No shouting, no threats, just consequences quietly approaching. The door closed behind Daniel and Naomi with a soft chime, but inside the restaurant, the silence lingered. Conversations didn't resume right away. The jazz band kept playing, but the music now felt out of place, too cheerful for the tension hanging in the air. Ethan stood frozen behind the host's stand, his hands gripping the edge of the wood. A moment ago, he had been in control. Now, he wasn't sure if he could even breathe properly. One of the servers leaned toward him and whispered, "What was that about?" Ethan didn't answer. Across the room, diners exchanged looks. Some shook their heads. Others stared down at their plates, suddenly uncomfortable with the luxury they had been enjoying only minutes earlier. The manager finally emerged from the back, drawn by the shift in energy. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. Ethan swallowed. "Nothing," he said. "Just a misunderstanding." But it didn't feel like nothing. The next morning, just after sunrise, black vehicles pulled up outside Le Maison. Inspectors stepped out wearing official jackets, clipboards in hand. Staff arriving for the lunch shift froze in place. Within minutes, the kitchen was buzzing, but not with confidence. Freezers were opened. Storage shelves were checked. Labels were examined. Temperatures recorded. Problems surfaced quickly. Food stored past expiration. Improper refrigeration. Incomplete sanitation logs. Shortcuts taken for speed instead of safety. The head chef tried to explain. The assistant manager tried to argue. The inspectors listened. Then they wrote. By noon, the verdict was clear. A bright notice was taped to the front door. Closed. Health code violations. Customers arriving for lunch stopped and stared. Some pulled out their phones. Photos spread online within minutes. Former employees began commenting. So this is finally happening. I warned them years ago. They only cared about appearances. By evening, the story had gone viral. Inside his small apartment, Ethan watched the news replay footage of the restaurant he once guarded so proudly. His name wasn't mentioned, but he recognized the host stand, the entrance, the door where it had all begun. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not because the restaurant was closed, but because he finally understood what had really gone wrong. It wasn't just about inspections. It wasn't just about violations. It was about how easily he had decided who deserved respect. 2 days later, Le Maison officially announced its closure, pending further investigation. Daniel and Naomi returned once more, this time openly. No disguises, no assumptions, just professionalism. Naomi stood where she had been turned away days earlier. Standards matter, she said to the team, but fairness matters more. Daniel added, how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. That's the real test. They filed their final report and left quietly, as they always did. Weeks later, Naomi shared a single message online. It was short, simple, and it reached millions. Never judge worth by appearance. Power doesn't announce itself, and kindness is never a risk. For many, it was just another viral story. For Ethan, it was a lesson that stayed with him. A reminder that sometimes the smallest moment, a glance, a decision, a refusal, is all it takes to change everything. 48 hours after Daniel and Naomi were turned away, La Maison was closed. The once glowing entrance stood dark, the elegant sign dimmed, the glass doors locked with official seals stretched across them. Where valet cars once lined the curb, there was now only silence, and a few reporters lingering nearby, hoping for comments. Inside the empty restaurant, chairs were stacked, tablecloths removed. The soft jazz playlist that once played every night was finally turned off. The fall was sudden, but not accidental. As the investigation continued, more details surfaced. Inspectors uncovered emails showing repeated warnings ignored by management. Cost-cutting decisions made at the expense of safety. Complaints brushed aside because the restaurant's reputation had protected it for too long. For years, La Maison had survived on image. Luxury on the surface, neglect behind the scenes. The public reaction was swift. News outlets replayed the story again and again. Social media users debated what mattered more, food safety or discrimination. For many, the answer was simple: both. Former servers shared stories of being told who to prioritize and who to ignore. Kitchen staff admitted they were pressured to make it work, even when supplies weren't safe. Customers described being treated differently based on appearance. The comments piled up. This was bound to happen. Power always shows itself eventually. Respect should never be selective. And at the center of it all was Ethan. He packed his things quietly the day after he was fired. No dramatic confrontation. No speeches. Just a cardboard box and a short handshake from the manager who refused to meet his eyes. Walking out of the building for the last time, Ethan paused at the door, the same door where Daniel and Naomi had once been turned away. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind. The glance, the assumption, the choice. He told himself he was just doing his job, that he was following the culture of the place, that he hadn't meant any harm. But deep down, he knew better. The truth was harder to accept. Weeks later, the restaurant owner released another statement, promising reforms and accountability. But trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. Reservations never returned. Investors pulled out. What had taken years to build collapsed in days. Meanwhile, Daniel and Naomi continued their work as they always had, quietly, professionally, without celebration. They never gave interviews, never posted videos, never claimed credit. To them, this was never about punishment. It was about standards. A few days later, Naomi was asked during a conference why she never corrected Ethan the moment he refused them service. She answered calmly, "Because respect should be given before titles are revealed," she said, not after. That quote spread almost as fast as the original story. For many viewers, the lesson was impossible to ignore. You never know who someone is. You never know their role, their authority, or their influence. And more importantly, you never know what silent damage you're causing when you treat someone as less. As for Ethan, life moved on, but not unchanged. He took another job weeks later in a smaller place. No host stand, no velvet ropes, just people. And this time, he treated every guest the same, because he had learned something the hard way. True professionalism isn't about who you let in. It's about how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. And sometimes, the smallest decision, made in seconds, without thought, is all it takes to bring everything down. A week later, Naomi posted a short message online. It went viral. Respect should never depend on appearance. Power doesn't announce itself, and discrimination always costs more than kindness. The words were simple. No names, no accusations, no dramatic details. And yet, millions understood exactly what she meant. The post was shared across platforms. Comment sections filled with stories from people who had experienced similar moments, being ignored, judged, dismissed, or underestimated based on how they looked. Some shared anger. Others shared gratitude. Many shared relief that someone had finally said what they felt for years. Daniel and Naomi never responded to the comments. They didn't give interviews. They didn't celebrate. They didn't seek revenge. The restaurant's closure wasn't a victory to them. It was a consequence, a necessary one. They simply returned to their work, moving quietly from place to place, doing what they had always done, protecting public safety, enforcing standards, and reminding institutions that dignity matters just as much as compliance. For them, integrity was routine, not performance. But for Ethan, life was no longer routine. The lesson followed him everywhere. At his new job, he noticed things he had once ignored. The nervous guest standing slightly apart. The person who hesitated before speaking. The quiet confidence he had mistaken for weakness before. This time, he paid attention. Every greeting mattered. Every tone mattered. Every choice mattered. He remembered the look on Naomi's face. Not anger, not pride, but certainty. The kind that comes from knowing who you are without needing to explain it. Late one night, Ethan replayed the moment again, the moment he thought was small. He realized something uncomfortable. It wasn't the badges that changed everything. It was the assumption that came before them. He had believed power always looked a certain way. That importance announced itself. That respect was something to be earned through status. He was wrong, and that mistake cost him everything he thought he had built. Daniel once said quietly to a colleague, "People think authority is loud. It isn't. It's calm, and it's consistent." That truth stayed with Ethan, and it stayed with millions who watched the story unfold online. Because the message was bigger than one restaurant. It was about how often people decide who matters without knowing a single thing about them. It was about how silence can still harm, how politeness can still hide prejudice, how power doesn't always wear a name tag, and how one careless moment can reveal who you truly are. In the end, there was no courtroom drama, no public shaming, no grand speeches, just a quiet reckoning, and a reminder that the way you treat someone when you believe they have no power is the clearest reflection of your character. Never judge someone by their clothes. Never underestimate quiet confidence. And never forget, how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter reveals exactly who you truly are.